Alrighty, welcome back to K2 Paranormal. I'm Jackson, this is my YouTube channel. Anyone who is just tuning into this right now, you can go to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. You can hit the little bell for notifications for future videos. You can have a look at some of the old videos that I have put up before. This episode here, we're going to be having a look at 5 of the most haunted asylums in Australia. Now, it isn't the most haunted top 5. This is just 5 that I've actually put together myself. I've kept it nice and short and sweet. I haven't sort of bragged on too much about all the information. There's so much information on these old buildings. I've just done a general video on 5 of the most haunted asylums. So grab some popcorn, guys, and we'll get into it.
During the colonial times, the improvision and flexibility gave demand for the government to gain control of Australian psychiatry. Between 1811 and 1826, Australia's first lunatic asylum was established, the Castle Hill Lunatic Asylum, where the majority of the first doctors were in fact convicts themselves. Castle Hill was situated 7 miles north of Parramatta on a large uninhabited area, formerly a government agricultural settlement that would be worked by convict labourers until 1810. Since the first fleet arriving in 1788, Australia has instituted a British system of managing health, although prior to this, most individuals with mental health issues were placed together with the convicts. The mental health sector in Australia has been through a significant change in the last 50 years, with 20% of the people having experienced a mental health episode at least once in their lifetime. Towards the end of the 1800s, Norton Manning proposed illegal safeguards and procedures to be incorporated. An official head office and professional inspector general of the insane would have executive authority and legal capacity over all asylums in the state, which would classify all institutions incorporated into one organisation. During the 1960s, deinstitutionalisation gained momentum in Australia, and by the mid-1990s, the health service system underwent a major transformation. With welfare cost cutting and psychotropic drug treatment, majority of asylums in Australia were closed down by the 90s, although the Australian Institute of Health reported that there are 1,831 specialised psychiatric hospitals still operating, as opposed to the general hospitals costing more than $500 million annually. The word asylum stems from a religious institution which provided a sense of refuge for mentally ill patients, which began in 1247 at a place called Bethlehem as part of the priory of the New Order of Our Lady of Bethlehem in the City of London. Located in Beechworth, Victoria in Australia, on 106 hectares is the Beechworth Asylum. Following lobbying by the Beechworth Council in October of 1867, the lunatic asylum opened for the admission of patients who had previously been confined to the town's jail due to the lack of accommodation. The asylum held 1,200 beds, and the men were put to work as blacksmiths, tailors, carpenters and farm labourers, while the women worked as launderers, seamstresses and domestics. With a limited understanding of mental health problems and adequate medication until the 1950s, most seriously ill patients were detained by straitjackets and electric shock therapy. The building has been altered 7 times due to the government's approach to the treatment of mentally ill, disturbed people and the community's attitude towards mental illness. In the late 1800s, only 2 signatures were required to admit a patient to Beechworth Asylum, and 8 was needed for the release, forcing many people to endure a life in the asylum. Times changed, and so did the names of the asylum over the years. From 1867 to 1905, it was Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. From 1905 to 1934, Hospital for the Insane, and in 1977, the Beechworth Psychiatric Hospital, or more commonly known as Mayday Hills. Between 1867 and 1995, over 9,000 deaths were recorded, and most buried in graves on the property, with sightings of the gardener, Arthur, and matron Sharp said still roam the halls. Construction began for the Arundel Lunatic Asylum in 1865, and by 1867 it was open for patients. Arundel could house up to 1,000 patients and had its own town within the town with market gardens, orchards, vineyards and a piggery. Located in Ararat, a rural city in the southwest Victoria, Australia, and having two other sister asylums at Kew and Beechworth, the Ararat Asylum employed over 500 staff between the 63 buildings. During December of 1886, the old jail of Ararat was proclaimed as J Ward of the asylum. Most people detained here were considered insane, but only until a new institution was being built at Sunbury in October of 1879. Over the years, patients brought to Ararat were subject to treatments like electric shock therapy and restraining jackets. In the 130 years that Ararat operated, over 13,000 deaths were recorded from 1867 to 1977. Today, the building stands as a reminder of the dark history of mental health treatments and the suffering they endured. Unexpected fainting, ominous smells, and banging, like the sounds of patients hitting their heads on the walls, can be heard. The apparition of Nurse Kelly is said to haunt the surgery theatre room, along with strange smells and cold spots. Located in Kew, Melbourne, Australia, is the Kew Asylum, built in 1871 and was one of the largest asylums in Australia ever built. Constructed between 1864 and 1872 of the Victorian Public Works Office and typical examples of Italianate architecture, was to be viewed as a magnificent asylum for the insane while avoiding the jail-like appearance of other asylums. Diagnoses given to patients in their first 50 years at Kew were as listed: delusional insanity, dementia, general paralysis of the insane, idiocy, melancholy, perpetual mania. During the earlier years at Kew Asylum, the distinction between lunatics and idiots was not clear, so children with an intellectual disability were also housed at the Kew. By 1879, nearly 600 children represented 1/4 of all inmates, and by the 1880s, cottage units were built called the Kew Idiot Ward and only admitted children. Some remained there until they were adults. Kew Asylum was continuously criticised by social services and medical professions as being a disgrace to the community, and in 1956 the children cottages were officially separated from the Kew Mental Hospital, which later became the Willsmere Mental Hospital. This asylum was no different, with its barbaric acts including plunge baths and general lack of quality of care, so it's no wonder many of its residents never left the halls. Formerly known as the Tarban Creek Lunatic Asylum is the Gladesville Mental Hospital, situated in Sydney, Australia. Built in 1838 as a psychiatric hospital, patients were then transferred from Liverpool and the Fremantle factory to a prison-like environment with inadequate facilities, isolation of patients, and a lack of substantial meals. By 1879, changes in the patient care were being made. The accommodation was extended and modernised. The first supervisor, John Thomas Digby, who set out to improve the treatment of the patients, as did his successor Frederick Norton Manning, who minimised the use of restraints and provided activities for the patients. A new humane philosophy emerged among medical professionals about rehabilitation in remote asylums with pleasant natural surroundings, and by the late 1860s, the Royal Botanic Gardens were donating exotic plant species, pathways and structures. Away from the tall palm trees and winding paths was the grave reality of what was going on behind the walls of the asylum. By 1844, Tarban was being built for 60 inmates but housed 148, and a new building was needed, and the hospital cemetery from 1847 to May of 1895 was constructed. Families refused to pick up bodies, so mass graves were dug out of the 1,228 buried, only 923 being identified and 305 were lost. Gladesville finally closed its doors in January of 1993. Established in 1857 in Fremantle, Perth, Western Australia, was a government-run Fremantle lunatic asylum to house adults with mental illness. In November of 1857, a temporary asylum was located in Scott's Warehouse on the corner of Croke and Cliff Street, with the first patients being accommodated in the roundhouse and the wreck of the Marquis of Anglesea, and the first colonial hospital named the Noel, a two-storey stone building with 52 beds. Using convict labour, the Fremantle Asylum was a colonial Gothic building designed by Lieutenant Colonel Edmund Henderson, the General for Convicts of Western Australia, and housed up to 50 beds. The construction supervisor, James Manning, who was the Clerk of Works, overseen the completion, which took just over 4 years. With the transportation of convicts starting in the 1850s, the number of mentally ill patients being admitted increased dramatically. The demand to build more accommodation came, and by 1886 the Public Works Department was created under the Superintendent of Public Works, George Temple Poole, who designed the North East Wing. As years went by, the names changed of the asylum, and so did its general purposes. By the 1890s, the psychiatric hospital was taking children from 9 to 15 years old. A 10-year-old girl was admitted in 1886 and remained there until she was transferred in 1908 to the Claremont Hospital. The asylum later became the Lunatic Asylum and Old Women's Home, and housed shelter for homeless women and also a school for midwives. The asylum never had a full-time practitioner or did not receive any funded treatment to improve health, their prospects, or any of their experiences in the asylum. By the early 1900s, 2 suspicious deaths grabbed the attention of local news media. The government held an inquiry, and a recommendation to demolish the building due to its sanitary conditions of its patients was in play. However, the patients were moved to other facilities, and Fremantle Lunatic Asylum closed its doors in 1909. During the end of World War II, an American-based armed services used the building as headquarters and a laundromat until the 1950s, when Mayor of Fremantle, Frederick Sampson, led a campaign to halt the demolition, and after years of lobbying for the state and federal government funding, a restoration project started in 1970 to 1972. Shortly after, the building was used by the Western Australian Maritime Museum, which has since been relocated. Currently today, the building serves as a reminder of our past, and since 1973 it has been used as Fremantle Arts Centre, with the founding director Ian Templeton running art programs and services for 17 years, and in 1978 the Arts Centre received its first state government funding. The Arts Centre also offers displays, live music, a cafe and a gift shop.
Alrighty, how did you go with that one? Did you enjoy it? Look, it was just, like I said at the start, it was just a general description of 5 of the most haunted asylums in Australia. There's so many, I could have done 10 or 20 of them, but I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. I enjoy you guys subscribing to my channel because it has helped me out. It helps me push these videos out a little bit more. And also just with the way that we look at mental illness and the way that we house people, like the asylums were dark, they're cold, they didn't have the right medications, food. So the way that we treat mental illness today, I'm glad things have improved. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching this episode. Stay spooky, guys. Catch you later. See ya.